Hello everyone, welcome back to Hit the Apex. I'm Charlie and today we have another video. This time we are reviewing round 7 of the 2023 season where we are off to Monaco for the 2023 Monaco Grand Prix. Before we get going, we make sure to like, share and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Dugout David, the football channel, Hit the Apex, the F1 channel, and at MCFC Hibs on Twitter. If you have been paying attention to the channel and the news in F1, round 6 was meant to be at Emilia Romagna. So the last race we actually had was Miami, which was a couple of weeks ago. Of course, we meant to have Emilia Romagna, also known as Imola, in between, but of course, the race got cancelled due to flooding. F1 released this statement. The Formula One community wants to send its thoughts to the people and communities affected by the recent events in the Emilia Romagna region. We also want to pay tribute to the work of the emergency services who are doing everything they can to help those in need. Following discussions between Formula One, the president of the FIA, the competent authorities, including the relevant ministers, the president of the Automobile Club of Italy, the president of the Emilia Romagna region, the mayor of the city and the promoter, the decision has been taken not to proceed with the Grand Prix this weekend at Imola. The decision has been taken because it's not possible to safely hold the event for our fans, the teams and our personnel, and it's the right and responsible thing to do given the situation faced by the towns and cities in the region. It will not be right to put further pressure on the local authorities and emergency services at this difficult time. Stefano Domenicali, the president and CEO of Formula One, said it's such a tragedy to see what has happened to Imola and Emilia Romagna, the town and region that I grew up in, and my thoughts and prayers are with the victims of the flooding and the families and communities affected. I want to express my gratitude and admiration for the incredible emergency services who are working tirelessly to help those who need help and alleviate the situation. They are heroes and the whole of Italy is proud of them. The decision that has been taken is the right one for everyone in the local communities and the F1 family, as we need to ensure safety and not create extra burden for the authorities while they deal with this very awful situation. The FIA president Mohammed bin Sulayem said, "My thoughts on those of the entire FIA family and with those affected by this terrible situation in the Emilia Romagna region. The safety of everyone involved and recovery efforts are the top priority at this time." So we will move from Imola to the streets of Monte Carlo, where, of course, the 2023 Monaco Grand Prix took place. And it was the general session of practice 1, practice 2, practice 3, qualifying and the race. There was no sprint race this weekend. So, of course, we will start on Friday and the first session of the weekend, practice 1. Carlos Sainz and Ferrari made a fast start to their Monaco Grand Prix weekend as the Spaniard led the way in the first practice session in Monte Carlo, setting the pace ahead of Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton in the opening practice session in Monaco. In a busy session in which the drivers and their teams looked to get up to speed and in tune with the circuit, it was Sainz who set the early pace on the medium tyre with a time of 1 minute 14.251 seconds to lead his teammate Charles Leclerc and Alonso. Hamilton then vaulted to the top of the timesheets before Haas's Nico Hülkenberg collided with the wall at turn 13, damaging his left rear tyre and while he was able to make it back to the garage, the session was briefly red flagged as they were forced to fix the barrier. Upon resumption of the session, the fast laps began to come in from the drivers, with Sainz going even faster on the medium tyre with a time of 1 minute 13.372 seconds to lead Alonso by 0.338 seconds. Three-time winner in Monte Carlo, Hamilton looked comfortable in the upgraded W14, with his fastest time good enough for third, ahead of last year's winner Sergio Perez in fourth for Red Bull. Home favourite Leclerc was fifth for Ferrari, while championship leader Max Verstappen had a disjointed session, complaining of bottom and rear end issues on his RB19, although he still set a time good enough for sixth. Lando Norris, sporting the one-off Triple Crown livery on his McLaren, was seventh, ahead of the Alpine of Esteban Ocon and the other Aston Martin of Lance Stroll. Alex Albon was 10th for Williams, although it was a bad end to the session for the tied driver as he crashed into the barriers on the exit of Turn 1, bringing an early end to proceedings in the opening hour. Valtteri Bottas was 11th for Alfa Romeo, while Kevin Magnussen was 12th for Haas in their 150th Grand Prix weekend in Formula 1. Yuki Tsunoda was 13th for AlphaTauri, ahead of his former teammate Pierre Gasly and the other Mercedes of George Russell in 15th, with the Briton complaining of brake and tyre issues on his upgraded W14. Nick de Vries was 16th, ahead of his fellow rookies Oscar Piastri and Logan Sargent in the McLaren and Williams respectively, with Zhou Guanyu in 19th and Nico Hülkenberg at the bottom of the field. And second practice session took place on the same day, of course, Friday at 5 p.m. local time, where Verstappen led Leclerc while Sainz crashes during ultra-close second practice in Monaco. Red Bull driver Max Verstappen topped a tight second practice session for the Monaco Grand Prix on Friday afternoon, lapping marginally quicker than Ferrari pair Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, the latter crashing out in the closing stages. Given that qualifying and track position is so important on the tight and twisty streets of Monte Carlo, FP2 brought plenty of one-lap action, initially on the medium and hard tyres before a move to the soft compound for the first time this weekend. Having led the way in the early stages of the season with a strong medium shod lap, Verstappen maintained his P1 spot on softs by pumping in a time of 1 minute 12.462 seconds, putting him 0.065 seconds clear of Leclerc, with Sainz a few hundredths back. However, a promising session for the Scuderia ended on a sour note when Sainz thumped the right-hand sidewall at turn 15, hopped over the curbs and slid into the barriers on the exit of turn 16, damaging his car and bringing out the red flags. Fernando Alonso placed fourth in his Aston Martin, but the two-time world champion, eager to turn his run of podiums into a victory this weekend, was left to lament traffic on his soft tyre runs, radioing his team that rivals' car positioning left him speechless. After losing the first quarter of the session to setup changes, Lando Norris put his McLaren an impressive fifth on the timesheets, eclipsing the upgraded Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton and the Red Bull of Sergio Perez, who also swore over the radio after encountering slower cars. Valtteri Bottas was the lead Alfa Romeo driver with a solid run to 8th, while Alpine duo Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon beat Aston Martin's Lance Stroll and Mercedes' George Russell to the final two spots in the top 10. Guanyu lapped 3 tenths slower than teammate Bottas en route to 13th, followed by Haas pair Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg, the latter bouncing back from his FP1 incident, and the AlphaTauris of Yuki Tsunoda, who picked up a puncture when he clipped the wall at turn 10, and Nick de Vries. Oscar Piastri had a quiet session in his McLaren, posting a time some 8 tenths slower than Norris, while Williams driver Alex Albon and Logan Sargent brought up the rear. Albon only hit in the track for the final 10 minutes after his FP1 crash forced mechanics to fit a new gearbox, front wing, rear wing, floor and front left suspension. F1 drivers and teams will analyse the data they've collected into the Monaco evening before returning to the track on Saturday, with final practice scheduled to begin at 12:30 local time and the all-important qualifying at 4 p.m. So we will move to final practice then. Practice 3, where Verstappen narrowly leads Perez as Hamilton crashes out in final practice in Monaco. Max Verstappen picked up from where he left off in FP2 to lead the way in a curtailed third practice of the Monaco Grand Prix, with the Dutch driver narrowly ahead of teammate Sergio Perez in preparation for qualifying. After an action-packed first day of running in Monte Carlo, the track was less busy at the start of Saturday, with most drivers opting to stay in the garage to begin the session. However, one by one, the drivers began to come out on track, focusing on qualifying simulation runs, with Verstappen setting the benchmark pace with a time of 1 minute 12.776 seconds to lead his Red Bull teammate Perez by just 0.073 seconds. The drivers then made the switch to another set of soft tyres, but before the lap times could begin to tumble, Kevin Magnussen stopped at Portier, complaining of having no power and bringing out the virtual safety car. Upon the resumption of the session, Hamilton set the fastest first sector before crashing into the barrier at the exit of turn 5, bringing out the red flags and calling an early end to final practice. Lance Stroll, one of the few drivers able to set a lap on a new tyre, was third for Aston Martin ahead of the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz and the McLaren of Lando Norris, who continued to impress in fifth. Pierre Gasly was sixth for Alpine ahead of home favourite Charles Leclerc in seventh, with Hamilton ending the session in eighth. Esteban Ocon, who had earlier stopped on track with a mechanical issue, was able to come back out to set ninth fastest time of the session, with Valtteri Bottas rounding out the top 10 for Alfa Romeo. George Russell was 11th, ahead of the Haas pair of Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg in 13th, with Fernando Alonso down in 14th in the other Aston Martin. Yuki Tsunoda was 15th for AlphaTauri, ahead of Zhou Guanyu in 16th, followed by the Williams pair of Logan Sargent and Alex Albon, who looked to recover from his crash in FP1 and lack of running in FP2 in 18th. Oscar Piastri, who admitted to struggling on the first day of running in Monaco, was down in 19th for McLaren, with his fellow rookie Nick de Vries down in 20th. So at 4 p.m. on the same day was the all-important qualifying session, where Verstappen snatches pole from Alonso in thrilling Monaco Grand Prix qualifying session. Red Bull driver Max Verstappen will start the Monaco Grand Prix from pole after coming out on top in a breathless qualifying hour at the Monte Carlo circuit, pipping Aston Martin rival Fernando Alonso and Ferrari's Charles Leclerc. In a pole shootout that did not feature Verstappen's teammate Sergio Perez, who crashed out of Q1, several drivers enjoyed spells at the top of the timesheets amid a sequence of laps that had fans on the edge of their seats. With Alonso on provisional pole, it took a mighty effort of 1 minute 11.365 seconds from Verstappen to secure P1, denying the Spaniard what would have been his first pole since 2012 by just under a tenth of a second. Alonso nonetheless took a spot on the front row, followed by home favourite Leclerc and the Alpine of Esteban Ocon, who posted a stunning lap of his own to get the better of Carlos Sainz in the other Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton recovered from his accident in final practice and scruffy Q1 and Q2 phases to take sixth in the revised Mercedes W14, followed by the second Alpine Pierre Gasly and teammate George Russell. Yuki Tsunoda achieved his second Q3 appearance of the season en route to ninth, with Lando Norris rounding out the top 10 despite a meeting with the barriers in Q2. While Norris progressed to Q3, Piastri just missed out in the other McLaren, taking 11th ahead of Nick de Vries, who recorded the best qualifying result of his AlphaTauri stint to date in 12th. Williams' Alex Albon, Aston Martin's Lance Stroll and Alfa Romeo's Valtteri Bottas rounding out Q2. Logan Sargent lapped little more than half a tenth in his quest for Q2, with the American the first to miss the cut in 16, followed by Kevin Magnussen, whose FP3 session was impacted by hydraulics trouble, and Nico Hülkenberg in a double Q1 exit for Haas. Zhou Guanyu ended qualifying in 19th despite at one stage topping the timesheets during a busy opening phase, with Perez's early accident exiting Sandavor, leaving him at the front of the order and facing a massive challenge to score points on Sunday. So as it happened then in Q1, it was a disaster for Perez as he crashes out of the action. After 3 drama-filled practice sessions, it was Verstappen who set the early benchmark when qualifying got underway, pumping in a 1 minute 13.784 second lap on the soft compound tyre to lead teammate Perez by just under a tenth, with Alonso and Stroll a few hundredths back. With cars pounding around and grip levels improving all the time, Zhou raised eyebrows up and down the pit lane by going P1 for Alfa Romeo before the McLarens of Piastri, and then Norris, with a 1 minute 13.485 second lap, slotted ahead to form an unexpected leading trio as Q1 reached its halfway mark. But while others were enjoying plenty of grip, Perez lost control of his Red Bull through Sandavor, slammed into the barriers and littered debris all over the track, bringing out the red flags as the Mexican swore over the radio at his early qualifying bath. After a short delay, drivers streamed back out onto the track to try and secure a place in Q2, with Verstappen promptly reclaiming top spot thanks to a low 1 minute 13 second lap, before Alonso stated his and Aston Martin's intentions by moving the target to a 1 minute 12.886 second lap. It was a theme that continued as the field completed several hot laps on the soft rubber, Verstappen going faster still with a 1 minute 12.644 second lap to slot back in front of Alonso, Leclerc and Stroll, while the Alpines of Ocon and Gasly sandwiched Russell's Mercedes. A frenetic conclusion to the session saw Tsunoda briefly lead the way before Verstappen delivered yet another improvement on a 1 minute 12.386 second lap, with the 18 drivers behind jostling for position and sending the timesheets into a blur of purple and green sector times. Hamilton was under pressure after his FP3 crash and a low-key start to Q1, and after pitting for a fresh set of tyres, he appeared to have blown his chances with a mistake at the Nouvelle chicane, but a strong enough final lap got him into the top 10 and through to Q3. Through to Q2. In the end, Verstappen and Tsunoda set the pace from the high-flying Williams of Albon, Sainz, Stroll, the Mercedes machines of Russell and Hamilton, Norris, Alonso and Leclerc, who had to avoid his Ferrari teammate at the exit of La Rascasse late on. Highlighting just how much the track had ramped up, Ocon and Gasly dropped to 11th and 13th in their Alpines, split by Piastri, with Bottas and De Vries the last drivers to make it through to Q2 at the end, at the expense of Sargent, who missed the cut by just over half a tenth. Haas pair Magnussen and Hülkenberg both dropped out in Q1 in 17th and 18th, with one-time Q1 leaders Johan Perez, who cut a depressed figure on his return to the pit lane, bringing up the rear. So knocked out in Q1 was Sargent, Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Zhou and Perez. In Q2 then, Verstappen leads again, but Leclerc and Alonso keep the pressure on. With 5 cars out the way, drivers had slightly more track to play with as Q2 began, and Verstappen wasted no time in pumping in another eye-catching lap, working his way down to a 1 minute 12.038 second lap to lead Alonso, the Alpines of Gasly and Ocon, and the Ferraris of Sainz and Leclerc. Norris and Piastri kept McLaren firmly inside the top 10 with their first runs of the second phase, followed by the sole remaining Alfa Romeo of Bottas and the Mercedes of Hamilton, who was doing his best to build up speed after his FP3 off and Q1 struggles. Just after Russell leapt up the order, Hamilton reported concerns over his rear suspension as he battled to be on the right side of the Q3 cutoff, while there was further drama elsewhere when Norris ran wide at the back and clipped the wall, forcing him back to the pits for repairs. Amid another flurry of lap times to the checkered flag, it was Verstappen who ended Q2 on top with a 1 minute 11.908 second lap, just under 2 tenths clear of Leclerc, with Alonso, Russell and Hamilton who managed to pull off another late improvement and also for close company. Gasly, Sainz, Ocon, Tsunoda and Norris, despite the latter's brush with the wall, were the final drivers to make it into Q3, with Piastri dropping out alongside De Vries, Albon, Stroll, whose early promise was undone by Mr. Call-Up to the weighbridge and a mistake at La Rascas on his final lap, and Bottas. So knocked out in Q2 was Piastri, De Vries, Albon, Stroll and Bottas. And in Q3 it was an incredible battle for pole on Monte Carlo streets. Verstappen continued where he left off when the green light came on, and at the end of the pit lane to signal the start of Q3, kicking off the decisive final phase with a 1 minute 12.102 second lap, just before waiting to see what Aston Martin and Ferrari had to offer. Shortly afterwards, Alonso smashed Verstappen's marker with a 1 minute 11.706 second lap, prompting him to declare that he was pushing like an animal over the radio, to which his engineer agreed, as Sainz and Leclerc also slotted ahead of the Red Bull. Verstappen responded with a 1 minute 11.654 second lap to restore his P1 status, until Ocon put together his lap of the season so far to go a 10th clear and threaten an upset, but there will be plenty more twists and turns in the closing minutes of the session. Serving up a treat for those watching around the world, Leclerc's efforts to make it a hat-trick on Monaco pole saw him get down to a 1 minute 11.471 second lap, followed by Alonso producing a 1 minute 11.449 second lap, and finally Verstappen putting both hands on his first pole in the Principality with a 1 minute 11.365 second lap, which included a sublime final sector. Ocon's charging attempt was good enough for fourth, switching the Ferraris, while Gasly put his Alpine between the two Mercedes. Tsunoda wound up ninth, and Norris took his repaired McLaren back en route to 10th, having been held up by Leclerc through the tunnel in an incident the stewards would investigate post-session. Verstappen said after qualifying, "I'm very happy. We knew that this was going to be a little bit of a struggle for us this weekend to get everything together. Yesterday wasn't the best start, but I think we kept on improving and kept on getting better. In qualifying, you need to go all out and risk it all. My first sector wasn't ideal on my final lap. I think turn 1 was a bit cautious, but then I knew I was behind. So the last sector, I gave it everything I had and clipped a few barriers. We need a clean start to the race. It's a short run to turn 1. I mean, in Monaco, a lot of things can happen. Safety car, rain, you name it. There's always a bit of chaos involved. I think race pace-wise, the car is quick, so that's not the problem, but we just need to keep it clean and calm." So the 2023 Monaco Grand Prix begins at 3 p.m. local time on Sunday. So we will move to that race in Monte Carlo, where Verstappen beats Alonso to Monaco Grand Prix victory despite rain causing late drama. Max Verstappen kept Red Bull's 2023 winning record intact by overcoming a rain shower and the chaos that ensued in the closing stages of the Monaco Grand Prix, leading home Aston Martin rival Fernando Alonso and the Alpine of Esteban Ocon. Verstappen made a clean getaway when the race began to maintain his pole position advantage over Alonso into the first corner, with the Red Bull opting for medium starting tyres and the Aston Martin going for hard. But as the race developed and their planned one and only stops approached, a rain shower hit the track to turn the encounter on its head, causing a flurry of off-track excursions, brushes with the barriers and pit lane activity. Alonso pitted while only a portion of the track was damp and initially took on mediums, but intensifying rainfall meant he was forced back in for intermediates, which the rest of the field clambered for as well. Crucially, Verstappen went straight for his starting mediums to intermediates, surviving contact with the wall before pitting, getting back into a rhythm in the mixed conditions and controlling proceedings to the checkered flag. Despite that extra stop, Alonso had enough in hand to retain second and score Aston Martin's best result of the season so far, with Ocon converting his eye-catching qualifying performance into the final podium spot. Mercedes' updated W14s racked up a solid haul of points as Lewis Hamilton and George Russell took 4th and 5th, the latter's 5-second penalty for clashing with Sergio Perez when he rejoined the track from an off in the slippery conditions, not affecting his final position. Home favourite Charles Leclerc crossed the line where he started in 6th, having been given a free-place grid penalty for impeding Lando Norris in qualifying, followed by the other Alpine of Pierre Gasly and Ferrari teammate Carlos Sainz, who lost out with a spin in the wet. Norris and Oscar Piastri gave McLaren a double points finish in 9th and 10th, completing late moves on AlphaTauri rival Yuki Tsunoda, who then tumbled down the order to 15th amid a lock-up and brake complaints. Alfa Romeo round up 11th and 13th with Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu sandwiching the other AlphaTauri and Nick de Vries, followed by Williams, Alex Albon, Tsunoda and Perez, who could do no more than 16th after his qualifying crash. Haas's Nico Hülkenberg endured a messy race en route to 17th, having been given a 5-second penalty by the stewards for hitting Logan Sargent on lap 1 that was not served correctly, resulting in an additional 10-second penalty. Sargent was the final finisher following an early race puncture, with Kevin Magnussen retiring his Haas in the closing laps after being the last driver to ditch slick tyres and visiting the barriers, and Aston Martin's Lance Stroll the other to DNF after an array of incidents. So as it happened then, just as the dust was settling on a frenetic qualifying hour around Monaco's tight and twisty streets, the stewards dropped a communication that would see Leclerc fall from 3rd to 6th position for his home race, having impeded Norris in Q3. It marked yet another setback for the Monegasque, whose troubles on home soil over the years have left fans wondering whether he's cursed, as Ocon, teammates Sainz and Hamilton all gladly accepted a gained grid spot at a venue where track position is vital. But all eyes were on the front row of the grid and whether Verstappen or Alonso would make the better start and win the dash to Saint-Devote, with the Aston Martin driver teasing after qualifying that his Red Bull's rivals' starts so far this season have been inconsistent. When the blankets came off, an intriguing mixture of starting tyres were revealed, with Verstappen, Ocon, Hamilton, Tsunoda and Norris the top 10 runners to opt for the medium compound, and Alonso, Sainz, Leclerc, Gasly and Russell picking hards. The rest of the runners were split between mediums and hards, with Zhou the only driver to go with softs as he looked to make up ground for 19th on the grid, which was completed by the out of position Perez after he dramatically crashed in qualifying. As the lights went out, pole sitter Verstappen put his softer tyres to good use by charging away from his grid spot and maintaining his advantage over Alonso into the first corner, with Ocon holding 3rd from Sainz, Hamilton, Leclerc, Gasly, Russell, Tsunoda and Norris. Further back, there was all sorts of drama as Hülkenberg locked up under braking for Mirabeau and thumped his way past Sargent before Stroll got caught between Albon and the right-hand side barrier at a hairpin, shedding some carbon fibre in the process. Following further contact in the bottleneck effect, Hülkenberg and Zhou pitted in at the end of the lap to move on to the hard tyres, with Perez also coming in for a set of the white marked rubber, all three seemingly bidding to run all the way to the checkered flag. Stewards acted quickly to give Hulkenberg a 5-second time penalty for his over-ambitious move on Sargent, while the panel also noted a potentially incorrect starting position for Russell, though ultimately decided against taking any further action. Up front, Verstappen got into a rhythm and edged away from Alonso, bringing his lead just over the 2-second mark as lap 10 of 78 approached, with Ocon some 10 seconds adrift, followed by Sainz, Hamilton and Leclerc, all circulating nose to tail. Then came another incident as Sainz clipped the rear of Ocon's car exiting the tunnel, leaving him with a damaged front left end plate that worked itself loose on the following lap and was subsequently run over by Hamilton and Leclerc, but with no punches caused. Moments later, Alonso's express puncture concerns of his own as he slipped 5 seconds away from lead of Verstappen, but the Aston Martin pit wall reassured him that all looked well in the data and there was no need to pit for a new set of tyres. Although Ferrari's mechanics emerged in the pit lane with a new front wing, Sainz stayed out on track between Ocon and Hamilton and regained his composure, with the stewards showing him a black and white flag, an official warning for the aforementioned clash. With the top 10 positions settling down, it was left to the midfield to provide the action as Magnussen cleared Sargent into Mirabel before Stroll dived past the Williams rookie on the inside of Rascas, and the recovering Perez also slipped ahead at the exit. Indeed, Williams were the biggest losers in this phase of the race, with Sargent giving away further spots to Hulkenberg and Zhou as Albon fell behind Bottas, the Grove team bringing both drivers in for fresh tyres, but having to box Sargent again for softs given that he had run out of hards thanks to a puncture. With the front-running pit stops approaching, Norris was told that Class 1 rain could arrive on lap 35 as clouds began to replace the blue skies that had initially covered the Monaco harbour, adding another element of intrigue to proceedings. While the wait went on to see who would blink first, Verstappen radioed Red Bull to report that his front left really isn't pretty and expressed concerns about a pack of backmarkers that had been fast approaching teammate Perez, the first on the list. Hamilton dived into the pits on lap 32, swapping his mediums for a set of hards, with Ocon doing the same one lap later, at which point Stroll and Perez banged wheels at the Nouvelle chicane as they squabbled for position after giving way to Verstappen. Sainz was the next to stop, moving from hards to mediums, but having slotted back in between Ocon and Hamilton, he lit up the airwaves amid frustration over Ferrari's strategy, saying the outcome was exactly what I talked about. With medium shod Verstappen battling more traffic and tyre troubles, he urged Red Bull to consider their strategic options. But the response was clear: if we pit now, we fall behind Fernando, said his engineer, with Alonso running the hard rubber. Perez's attempt to make the end of the race after his lap 1 pit stop went out the window when he clipped Magnussen in the middle sector. The number 11 paying another visit to the Red Bull box for a new front wing, with Stroll fortunate not to follow him after tagging the Dane at Anthony Nolge. Despite his traffic and tyre worries, Verstappen's advantage over Alonso was up to almost 10 seconds by lap 40, with Leclerc, Gasly and Russell also stretching out their first stints as more radio messages pointed to approaching rain. But a few tours later, the reigning double world champion added, I don't see how long I can keep this up, swiftly followed by Leclerc and Gasly deciding enough was enough and swapping their starting hards for mediums, leaving Verstappen, Alonso and Russell as the only front runners yet to pit. Maybe drops of rain around turn 6 to turn 8 came the next message from Red Bull to Verstappen, with Russell then reporting that it was indeed spitting at turn 3 before raining more and more, feet jiggling and heart rates rising up and down the pit lane. With the red and yellow flags waving and the middle sector of the lap looking particularly slippery, Bottas and Stroll felt it was time for intermediates, but the remaining 18 cars stayed out for the time being and battled the conditions on slicks. On lap 54, Alonso came into the pits, and rather than switching to intermediates, he went from hards to mediums, a decision that looked set to lose him a handful of positions when the rain intensified and spread to cover the entire circuit, forcing another stop. A flurry of pit lane activity followed as most drivers gave in and took on the intermediates, with Verstappen tagging the wall at Portier en route to his pit stop, but managing to make it around and emerge with his lead intact. After the stops, Verstappen led Alonso by more than 15 seconds, with Ocon sitting third ahead of Mercedes pair Hamilton and Russell, Leclerc in sixth, Gasly seventh, Sainz eighth, having spun at Mirabel before his move to intermediates, Tsunoda ninth and Norris rounding out the top 10. Magnussen was the only driver to stay out on slicks, but that brave mission ended with a trip to the barriers at La Rascasse, followed by another off-track excursion at Saint-Devote, despite pitting to put on the full wet rubber, which Hülkenberg and Perez also swapped to. Amid all the tyre changes, Russell was given a 5-second penalty for rejoining the track in an unsafe manner. TV replay showed him taking to the runoff at Mirabel, backing out and then banging wheels with Perez as he resumed, losing spots he had gained over Ocon and Hamilton. Stroll's race brought yet more drama when he lost his front wing at the exit of the hairpin before parking up and retiring, while Perez, having just been hit by Russell, had a wild slide through the swimming pool chicane and tagged the wall at the exit. Matters also got worse for Hülkenberg, who was hit with a 10-second time penalty due to his initial 5-second sanction not being served correctly, something witnessed earlier this season with Ocon in Bahrain and Alonso in Saudi Arabia. As the conditions stabilised, Verstappen continued to pull clear of Alonso, brushing away a question from his engineer about the conditions being anything other than inter, and building up his margin to almost 30 seconds by the checkered flag. It was a statement win from the championship leader, who is now 39 points clear of Perez in the drivers' standings, his teammate unable to climb higher than 16th after starting from the back as a result of his costly qualifying shunt. Ocon held his ground in the challenging conditions to take a superb third for Alpine after their mixed start to the campaign, followed by Mercedes pair Hamilton and Russell, the latter having enough of a margin over Leclerc despite the penalty. Gasly split the Ferraris in 7th, with Sainz, Norris and Piastri completing the points. The McLaren duo overtaking Tsunoda in the final laps before the AlphaTauri man ran off the road at Mirabel and swore on the radio at the state of his brakes. Bottas was the first of the Alfa Romeos to cross the line in 11th, followed by De Vries, who logged his best result with AlphaTauri so far. Teammates Zhou, Albon and Tsunoda, with 16th place Perez, left to rue what might have been after losing considerable ground to Verstappen in the title race. Hülkenberg's miserable day ended in P17 when his second time penalty took effect, with teammate Magnussen pitting late on to retire after his failed wet weather tyre gambles, and Stroll propping up the rear as the second DNF of the day via his various collisions and trips to the barriers. Verstappen said after the race it was quite a difficult one because we were on the medium initially and Fernando was on the hard tyre. We didn't want that to go that long, but we had to. The rain was coming and we didn't know really what was going on. The tyres were graining and then took a few laps to get through that graining phase, and the pace picked up a little bit, but it was still very tricky to drive. Then it started to rain lap by lap, and then we had to make the call to go on the inters. It was incredibly slippery when you are that far in the lead. You don't want to push too hard, but you don't want to lose too much time, so it's quite difficult in that scenario. I clipped the wall a few times. It was super difficult out there, but that's Monaco. After packing up in Monaco, the F1 paddock will head to the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya for the Spanish Grand Prix, which is scheduled to run from June the 2nd to June the 4th. So that is it for this video then. Everyone, thank you all so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. Dugout Dig the football channel, hit the Apex the F1 channel, and at MCFC Hibs on Twitter. Everybody, thank you all so much for watching, and we'll speak to you all soon. Take care and goodbye.